Jake Thompson had been tending his Wyoming ranch since dawn, the crisp morning air carrying the scent of pine and fresh earth. The sun was just beginning to warm the sprawling fields when he noticed something unusual near the water trough. Among the usual lively horses, a young filly stood apart, her coat dull and her posture tense. Unlike the others, she didn't nuzzle the trough eagerly or paw at the ground impatiently. Instead, she remained rigid, eyes wide and filled with a quiet fear that unsettled Jake. He shaded his eyes against the sunlight and studied her more closely. The filly was smaller than the rest, her ribs faintly visible beneath a coat that had lost its shine. She hadn't moved much since he first spotted her, and unlike the other horses, she made no attempt to drink or eat. It was as if she existed on the edge of the herd, watching but never joining. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Jake's boots crunched softly against the gravel as he walked toward the water trough, careful not to startle the filly. He had seen many horses come and go on this ranch over the years, but something about this young one tugged at him, a silent plea hidden behind those wide, frightened eyes. The others ambled over, their moods bright and playful. But the filly remained still, her head low, her breath shallow. He crouched down a few yards away, his voice low and steady. "Hey there, girl. You look like you've had a rough night." The filly flinched slightly but didn't bolt. Jake took that as a small victory. He pulled a handful of dried grass from the ground and slowly extended it toward her. Hesitant, she took a tentative step forward, then another, her ears flicking back nervously. Jake waited patiently, not daring to rush her. The morning light shifted, casting long shadows over the paddock as the other horses resumed their grazing and playful antics. Jake's gaze never left the filly, noting the tension in her muscles and the way she twitched at every sudden sound. She was exhausted but alert, as if expecting danger to spring from any corner. She was unlike the spirited foals he usually welcomed on his land. This one seemed marked by something deeper, an invisible weight pressing down on her small frame. Jake's mind raced through possibilities. Was she a stray from a neighboring ranch? Had she been lost or abandoned? Or worse, had she been hurt or mistreated? The questions piled up, but the filly offered no answers, only the quiet, trembling presence that held Jake's attention captive. He rose slowly, the gravel crunching beneath his boots, and circled the area to make sure no other horses were missing or in trouble. The rest of the herd was accounted for, their lively chatter filling the space with normalcy. Yet the filly remained apart, a silent shadow, among the sunlit fields. Jake glanced at his watch. The morning was slipping away, and the work ahead was endless. But something inside him insisted he stay a little longer. This filly needed more than just water and hay. She needed someone to see her, to understand the fear that clung to her like a second skin. He pulled his jacket tighter around him against the chill that still lingered in the air and moved closer again, this time speaking softly. "I'm Jake. You don't have to be afraid here." The filly's eyes flicked toward him, wide and shimmering with uncertainty. She took a tentative step forward, then another, her trembling less pronounced, but still evident. Jake crouched once more, offering the grass again. This time she accepted it, nibbling delicately at the edges. The small motion was a breakthrough, a fragile trust beginning to form. But even as she ate, her eyes darted around, never resting in one place for too long. He stayed with her, talking quietly about the ranch, the horses, the open skies that stretched endlessly above them. He hoped that in time, the filly would feel safe enough to drop the weight of fear she carried so heavily. For now, though, she remained silent and still, a mystery wrapped in the soft light of morning. Jake knew the day would be long and the path uncertain, but as he watched the filly take those first cautious bites, he felt a spark of hope. This quiet, frightened creature had crossed his path for a reason, and he was determined to find out what that reason was. Jake Thompson lingered near the water trough long after the filly had taken a few hesitant bites of hay. The sun climbed higher, warming the Wyoming air and casting rich, golden light across the paddock. But the filly's trembling persisted. She stood rigid, ears flicking nervously at every rustle of the wind and snap of a twig. Her wide eyes darted constantly, never settling on one spot for more than a moment. It was clear to Jake that her fear was not simply a passing reaction. It was ingrained, a deep-rooted anxiety that held her captive. Cautiously, Jake moved closer, mindful not to spook her. Each step was deliberate, slow, and measured. The filly flinched at every sound, the soft crunch of his boots on gravel, the distant caw of a crow perched atop a fence post. But she did not flee. Instead, she pressed her back against the wooden fence, as if seeking protection from the open space behind her. Her ribs were visible beneath a coat that had lost its sheen, and patches of her fur were dull and matted, evidence of neglect or hardship. Jake squatted low, keeping his profile small and non-threatening. "It's all right, little one," he murmured. "I'm not here to hurt you." The filly's eyes locked onto his for a brief second, and Jake caught a flicker of recognition, as if she understood his words, but still couldn't shake the terror that clung to her. He scanned her body more carefully this time. Her trembling wasn't just from fear, it was exhaustion too. The muscles in her legs quivered, and a faint sheen of sweat coated her forehead despite the cool morning. Jake's heart tightened. She had been running from something, or maybe running from nowhere at all, lost and alone. Jake's gaze shifted to her ribs, which showed more than just a faint outline. They protruded sharply beneath her thin skin, and the filly's hips were similarly prominent. Hunger was a silent enemy here, gnawing away at her strength. She had probably been surviving on scraps or worse, going without proper food for days. He reached out slowly, hand trembling slightly as it neared her neck. The filly flinched, pulling back, but not far enough to escape. Jake took this as a fragile sign of trust. He lowered his hand again, this time resting it softly against her shoulder. The roughness of her coat scratched his palm, and he could feel the rapid beat of her heart beneath the skin. Jake knew there was more to the story than just hunger and fear. Something invisible was weighing on this filly, a trauma deeper than physical wounds. He scanned her face, searching for any signs, scars, swelling, anything that might explain the shadows behind those wide eyes. But her face was clean, smooth except for the dirt smudges on her muzzle. The pain she carried was hidden, a silent agony that words could not touch. Despite her fear, the filly didn't pull away completely. She allowed Jake to stroke her neck gently, her body still trembling but less rigid. He offered her a few more bites of hay, which she accepted with cautious nibbling. It was a fragile peace, a quiet moment where trust began to take root. Jake spoke softly, recounting stories of other horses he'd cared for, hoping his calm voice would soothe her. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." The filly's ears twitched at his words, but the tension in her muscles remained. Every noise startled her, every shadow seemed to threaten. He noticed how she flinched when a sudden breeze rustled the leaves or when a distant dog barked. It was as if the filly had been conditioned to expect danger at every turn, and the world was a place to fear rather than explore. Jake's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle of her behavior. This was not the wild spirit of a free horse. This was the broken soul of one who had seen hardship far beyond her years. Jake scanned the paddock again, making sure no other horses were nearby to disturb the fragile calm. The rest of the herd grazed lazily in the sun, their movements carefree and familiar. The filly, by contrast, seemed trapped in a bubble of anxiety, watching the world but never fully participating. He thought about the days ahead and the patience it would take to earn her trust. This was no ordinary rescue. It was a slow process of healing, both physical and emotional. He wanted to help her, but knew that rushing wouldn't serve either of them well. As he sat quietly beside her, Jake listened to the steady rhythm of her breathing, shallow but steady, and felt the faint warmth of her body against his palm. For a moment, the filly's wide eyes softened, and she leaned slightly into his touch. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Jake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a carrot he had saved from breakfast. He broke it into small pieces and held one out to her. The filly's lips parted hesitantly before accepting the treat, her teeth gently nibbling at the sweetness. She paused, then took another small bite, her eyes watching Jake intently. That simple act, accepting food directly from his hand, was a breakthrough. It meant she was beginning to see him not as a threat, but as a source of comfort. Still, the flicker of fear never fully vanished, lurking beneath the surface like a shadow waiting to reemerge. Jake leaned back, letting the silence stretch between them. The filly snorted softly, a sound that was almost a question, and Jake answered with a gentle smile. "We'll take it slow, girl, one step at a time." As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Jake remained by her side, speaking softly about the ranch, the open skies, and the herd she would someday join. He wanted her to know that this place was different, that here she could find safety, food, and maybe even happiness again. But for now, the filly simply trembled, her body tense and fragile. Jake understood that beneath her delicate frame was a spirit battered by fear, one that would need time, patience, and kindness to heal. He resolved to stay close, to watch for every flicker of trust, and to never rush the fragile journey ahead. The road to recovery would be long, but Jake was ready to walk it with her, step by cautious step. The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across Jake Thompson's Wyoming ranch, when he finally made a decision that had been brewing in his mind all day. The filly, small, fragile, and trembling, still lingered near the water trough, her eyes wide with unease. Despite the warmth of the afternoon and the quiet presence Jake offered, she remained distant, barely engaging with the world around her. Jake wiped the sweat from his brow and glanced toward the barn, its sturdy wooden frame bathed in the soft glow of the fading sun. It was a place of shelter, a refuge where horses could find safety from storms and predators alike. For the filly, though, it could mean something more. A sanctuary from the fear and hunger that had gripped her for so long. He approached her slowly, hands raised in a calming gesture. "All right, girl," he said softly. "I think it's time you come inside, where it's safe and warm." The filly flinched, but did not bolt. Instead, she watched him with wide, uncertain eyes, as if weighing the danger of this new proposition. Jake knew he couldn't force her. Trust had to be earned, not demanded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small handful of sweet feed, holding it out tentatively. The filly's nose twitched, and after a moment, she stepped forward to nibble at the grains. Encouraged, Jake began to move toward the barn, his voice gentle and patient. Come on, I'll show you where you can rest. Behind him, the soft clip-clop of his trusted mare, Daisy, echoed as she followed quietly. Daisy was calm and steady, a reminder of the stability Jake hoped to offer the filly. Together, they moved slowly toward the barn doors. The filly hesitated at the threshold, her body tense and trembling. The barn was a different world, dimmer, enclosed, carrying the scent of hay, horses, and old wood. It was unfamiliar and intimidating. But Jake's presence was steady, a silent reassurance that she was not alone. With a gentle nudge from Jake's outstretched hand, the filly stepped inside, her hooves clattering softly against the wooden floor. Jake closed the door behind them, muffling the sounds of the outside world, the wind, and distant calls of the herd. Here, there was silence and safety. He led her to a corner stall, lined with fresh straw that smelled sweet and clean. "This will be your space," Jake said kindly. "You can rest here, eat when you're ready, and I'll be right outside if you need anything." The filly lowered her head cautiously to sniff the bedding, her breath shallow but steady. Jake knelt beside the stall, offering more sweet feed and a slow, soothing voice. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." The filly's ears flicked forward, and she nibbled at the food, her trembling easing just slightly. The barn's quiet was a balm against the fear that had gripped her all day. Outside, the world was loud with the sounds of nature and the herd's restless movement. But inside, it was calm and secure. Jake stayed with her, giving her space, but never leaving her alone. He thought about the long journey ahead. Bringing this filly into the barn was only the first step, and the hardest part was yet to come, earning her trust enough to heal her broken spirit. But Jake was no stranger to challenges, and the ranch had taught him patience in abundance. As evening settled, the filly finally lowered her trembling head to the straw, taking tentative bites of the soft hay Jake had placed nearby. Her breathing slowed, and the tension in her muscles began to fade. Jake watched quietly, feeling a flicker of hope that she might find comfort here. He reached through the stall bars and rested his hand gently on her neck. The filly shivered but did not pull away, a fragile connection forming between them. Jake whispered, "You're going to be all right." Outside, Daisy stood patiently by the barn door, her calm presence a reminder of the steady life the filly could one day share. Jake looked at his mare and then back to the filly, knowing that with time, kindness, and care, this frightened creature could become part of the ranch family. The night air grew cooler, and Jake covered the stall with a soft blanket to ward off the chill. He made a mental note to call the vet in the morning for a full examination. But for now, he let the filly rest, her first night of safety after an unknown ordeal. Jake's heart was heavy with questions, but lightened by the small progress they had made. He sat on the straw outside the stall, watching her settle into a fitful sleep, and vowed to be the steady hand she needed to find her way back to health and trust. In the quiet barn, surrounded by the scents of hay and earth, the filly found her first refuge. Jake knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain, but he was ready to walk it with her, one careful step at a time. Morning light filtered through the slats of the barn, casting soft beams over the straw where the filly had spent her first night in safety. Jake Thompson was already up, his boots crunching softly on the gravel as he moved toward the barn. The air was crisp, carrying the unmistakable scent of hay, earth, and the faint musk of horses. The filly lay quietly in her stall, her coat appearing slightly brighter in the gentle dawn, but her eyes still held that wary glint of fear. Jake crouched down beside her, speaking softly. "Morning, girl. Ready for a visit from Dr. Clark?" The filly lifted her head cautiously, nostrils flaring as she sniffed the air, but otherwise remained still. Dr. Amanda Clark arrived shortly after sunrise, her white truck kicking up dust as it pulled onto the gravel driveway. She was a seasoned veterinarian, known across the county for her gentle approach and keen eye. Jake greeted her with a nod as she stepped from the vehicle, her medical bag swinging at her side. "I hear you've got a new friend who needs some TLC," Amanda said, her voice warm as she approached the barn. Jake led her inside, where the filly stood trembling but curious. Amanda's eyes softened as she knelt to meet the young horse's gaze. "Hey there, Bella," she murmured, already reaching for her stethoscope. The examination began with a careful assessment of Bella's vital signs. Amanda's hands moved deftly, checking pulse and temperature, observing the filly's breathing. She noted the faint tremors in Bella's legs and the slight stiffness in her movements. "She's underweight, no doubt about it," Amanda said quietly, "but no obvious injuries on her body." She ran her fingers along Bella's flanks and legs, feeling for any hidden bruises or swelling. The filly flinched at the lightest touch, a sign that pain or fear lingered just beneath the surface. Amanda's attention shifted to Bella's mouth, gently prying open her lips to inspect her teeth and gums. Bella resisted, pulling back slightly, but Amanda's calm voice soothed her. "Easy, girl. Just a quick look." She noticed Bella hesitated to chew as she examined the inside of her mouth, her jaw tight and reluctant. "Jake, I think there's something going on in her mouth," Amanda said, her brow furrowed. Her reluctance to chew could be a sign of oral pain or discomfort. She carefully scanned the gums and tongue, searching for any abnormalities. Jake knelt beside her, watching intently as Amanda's fingers traced along Bella's gums. "Could it be a tooth problem?" he asked. Amanda shook her head. "Not a tooth issue, but I do see something here." She pointed to a small, glinting object embedded in the soft tissue near Bella's lower jaw. It looked like a thin piece of wire, rusted and sharp at the edges. Jake's heart sank. "How long could that have been there?" he whispered. "Hard to say," Amanda replied, her voice steady despite the grim discovery. "But it's definitely causing her pain and could explain why she's been refusing to eat properly. That wire could have come from an old fence or some discarded debris." She gently examined the surrounding tissue, which was inflamed and sensitive. Bella shivered, her eyes wide and trusting despite the discomfort. Amanda reached into her bag and pulled out a small pair of pliers and a set of forceps. "We're going to have to remove this carefully. It's causing her pain, and it's likely why she's been so withdrawn." Jake nodded, ready to help in any way he could. Amanda worked with practiced precision, easing the filly's mouth open just enough to grasp the wire. Bella trembled but did not resist as Amanda pulled the sharp fragment free. The wire was bent and rusted, a cruel artifact of neglect. "There," Amanda said softly, holding up the tiny piece of metal. "This little thing has been hurting her all along." Jake reached out to stroke Bella's neck, feeling the tension in her muscles begin to ease. "No wonder she wouldn't eat," he murmured. Amanda cleaned the wound carefully, applying antiseptic and then a soothing gel to ease the pain. "She'll need some antibiotics to prevent infection and pain relief to help her heal," Amanda explained. "But once this is gone, I expect her appetite will improve and her mood should brighten." Jake smiled, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Amanda. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't see it." Amanda packed up her tools and gave Bella a final reassuring pat. Keep an eye on her eating habits, she advised. It might take a few days for the discomfort to fully subside, but with good care, she should be on the road to recovery. As Amanda left, Jake stayed beside Bella's stall, watching her nibble cautiously on a handful of softened feed. The relief was palpable. After days of fear and pain, the source of her suffering had been uncovered and addressed. But Jake knew that healing was not just physical. Bella's heart and spirit would need time to mend as well. He sat quietly, speaking softly to Bella, promising patience and kindness. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, hope felt tangible. A fragile thread of light weaving through the shadows that had enveloped the filly's life. The morning sun filtered softly through the barn's slatted windows as Jake Thompson prepared to spend another day with Bella, the fragile filly who had slowly begun to trust him. The previous day's discovery by Dr. Amanda Clark had weighed heavily on Jake's mind. A tiny piece of wire, sharp and rusted, embedded painfully in Bella's gums. The knowledge that such a small, hidden object had caused so much suffering stirred a mixture of anger and resolve within him. But now, with the wire carefully and successfully removed, the task was to nurse Bella back to health, both physically and emotionally. Jake approached Bella's stall with cautious optimism. The filly stood quietly, her coat a little brighter in the morning light, her eyes still wide but less haunted than before. His trusted mare, Daisy, ambled nearby, offering the calm companionship that had helped Bella feel safer in this new environment. Jake reached over the stall door and rested his hand gently on Bella's neck. The filly flinched at first, but then leaned into the touch, a fragile sign of trust. "Good morning, Bella," Jake said softly. "How are you feeling today?" Bella responded with a soft nicker, her breath steady but shallow. Fresh hay and softened feed awaited her on the stall floor, and Jake watched as she tentatively lowered her head to nibble at the food. The removal of the wire had eased the sharp pain that had kept her from eating, but the road to recovery was still long. Bella's ribs were still visible beneath her thin coat, and the stiffness in her legs showed signs of lingering weakness. Jake settled onto a bale of straw just outside the stall, speaking in a quiet tone. "You've got a long way to go, but we'll get there together." He spent the morning sitting close, offering small handfuls of feed and water, careful not to overwhelm her. Bella's trembling lessened as she began to eat in small, hesitant bursts. Throughout the day, Jake monitored Bella's progress closely. He noticed how she would startle at sudden noises or quick movements, a sign that the trauma she had endured was not just physical, but deeply emotional. Despite the pain that had been removed, the filly's spirit remained fragile and wary. With each gentle touch and quiet word, Jake worked to build a bridge of trust. He remembered the long years on the ranch, learning that patience was often the greatest healer. For Bella, this was a lesson in safety and kindness, an invitation to believe that not all hands that approached her would bring harm. As the sun climbed higher, Jake took the opportunity to clean the stall and replace the bedding with fresh straw. Bella watched him with wide eyes, occasionally shifting uneasily but not retreating. The simple act of care seemed to soothe her, the scent of fresh hay and clean straw offering a small comfort in this new world. Jake's thoughts turned to the wire's origin. "Probably from an old fence," he muttered to himself, frustration tightening his jaw. "Some careless hands left it behind, and you paid the price." The injustice of it all fueled his determination to keep Bella safe, to guard her against the dangers lurking in forgotten corners of the land. By late afternoon, Bella's appetite had improved noticeably. She ate more confidently now, though still in small amounts. Jake adjusted her feed to include a soft mash, easy on her tender mouth, enriched with vitamins and minerals to help rebuild her strength. He sat beside her quietly, watching as she explored the stall, her movements slow but deliberate. The stiffness in her legs remained, but the trembling had eased. It was progress, small but vital. As evening approached, Jake prepared a warm bucket of water mixed with electrolytes to keep Bella hydrated. She drank cautiously, her trust in Jake growing with each passing moment. He stroked her neck gently, whispering promises of safety and care. The emotional weight of Bella's ordeal was evident. Jake understood that beneath her physical wounds lay a deeper scar, fear that could not be seen, but was felt in every shiver and flinch. Healing her would require more than medicine. It would require time, patience, and unwavering kindness. Jake's ranch hands had begun to take notice. Dutch, Carson, and Layla, seasoned workers familiar with the rhythms of the land and animals, offered their quiet support. Jake planned to involve them in Bella's care, knowing that a team effort would be crucial to her recovery. As night settled over the ranch, Jake sat beside Bella's stall, the soft rustle of the straw the only sound between them. The filly rested her head against the wood, eyes closed in a moment of peace that had once seemed impossible. Jake reflected on how one small piece of wire had caused so much pain and fear, but also how its removal marked the beginning of a new chapter. He resolved to protect Bella fiercely, to nurse her back not just to health, but to hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, there was comfort in the quiet progress made today. A step toward healing that neither Jake nor Bella would take alone. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Jake Thompson found himself once again drawn to Bella's stall. The soft glow of morning light filtered through the barn's wooden slats, casting delicate patterns on the straw where the filly had begun to settle. Jake's heart lifted slightly as he watched her cautiously nibble on a small pile of softened feed. A quiet but promising sign that the pain from the wire had lessened enough for her to eat. Jake settled down beside the stall, his voice low and steady. "Good morning, Bella. Ready for another day?" The filly's ears twitched in response, her wide eyes meeting his with a tentative trust that had not been there before. The past days had been a careful balance of patience and vigilance. Jake knew that Bella's recovery would be as much about rebuilding trust as it was about physical healing. So he chose to spend his time nearby, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes simply sitting in silence, letting her get used to his presence. Slowly, the trembling that had so often gripped her began to ebb, replaced by moments of calm curiosity. Today, Jake decided it was time to encourage Bella to explore a little beyond the confines of her stall. He opened the door gently, watching as she hesitated on the threshold. The barn was a safe space, but the world beyond was wide and unpredictable, an intimidating prospect for any horse, especially one so fragile. With a soft murmur of encouragement, Jake stepped back, allowing Bella to take the first step out. Her hooves touched the barn floor, then the gravel outside, and she paused, nostrils flaring as she took in the scents of fresh grass, earth, and the warm sunshine. Her eyes flicked toward the open paddock where the rest of the herd grazed peacefully, their movements calm and familiar. Jake stayed close, offering a handful of feed to coax her forward. Bella's trembling returned briefly, but she took a few small steps, encouraged by Jake's steady presence. He noticed how her muscles tensed at sudden sounds, the distant bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves. But each time, she looked to him for reassurance. The filly's ribs were still visible beneath her coat, and her legs bore the marks of recent weakness, but she moved with a new tentative grace. Jake knew this was progress, a fragile but vital step toward reclaiming the confidence she had lost. Over the course of the morning, Jake let Bella wander the small paddock, her movements cautious but increasingly deliberate. He watched as she sniffed at patches of grass and lifted her head to scan the horizon. The world was vast and unpredictable. But for a moment, Bella seemed to forget her fear and simply be. Jake's heart swelled with hope, tempered by the knowledge that Bella's trauma ran deeper than the physical wounds. She flinched at sudden movements and loud noises, and the memory of pain lingered in her eyes. But with each passing hour, her trust in Jake grew stronger, a fragile thread binding them together. Back in the barn, Jake spent quiet moments sitting near Bella, offering soft words and gentle strokes along her neck. He was careful not to rush her, knowing that healing would take time. When Bella finally settled beside him, her trembling reduced to a gentle shiver, Jake felt a surge of relief. As afternoon light warmed the paddock, Jake prepared a small pile of soft feed mixed with supplements to aid her recovery. Bella approached slowly, her eyes flickering with cautious interest. She ate steadily, her body gradually absorbing the nourishment it so desperately needed. Jake's ranch hands stopped by to check on progress, their expressions softening as they saw Bella's tentative transformation. Dutch offered a few tips on handling nervous horses, while Layla suggested ways to enrich Bella's environment to build confidence. Jake welcomed their support, knowing that it would take a team to help Bella thrive. That evening, Jake sat quietly beside Bella's stall, the soft sounds of the ranch settling around them. Bella rested her head against the wooden wall, her breath steady and calm. Jake stroked her mane gently, murmuring promises of patience and care. He reflected on the journey so far, the discovery of the wire, the slow rebuilding of trust, the small victories that marked each day. Bella was still fragile, still cautious, but she was beginning to heal, both in body and spirit. Jake knew the road ahead would be long, filled with challenges and setbacks. But as he looked into Bella's wide, trusting eyes, he felt a quiet determination. Together, they would face whatever came next, step by slow step, toward a future where fear no longer held her captive. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow across the ranch as Jake Thompson watched Bella from a distance, her slender form moving cautiously at the edge of the paddock. The filly's progress had been steady, but despite the physical healing and the small moments of trust they shared, there remained an invisible barrier that Jake could not yet breach. Bella flinched at sudden movements, startled by noises that others barely noticed. The shadows of her past clung tightly, unseen but deeply felt. Jake had spent countless hours beside her, speaking softly, offering gentle touches, and allowing her the space to regain confidence at her own pace. But today, as Bella jolted away from a gust of wind that sent a loose tarp fluttering, Jake realized the emotional scars ran deeper than he had first imagined. He approached slowly, hands relaxed and voice calm. "It's okay, Bella. I'm here." She stopped trembling for a moment, turning her wide eyes toward him, but the tension in her body remained. She flinched at the slightest movement, her muscles taut as if ready to flee. Jake's heart ached. He knew this wasn't just fear, it was trauma, etched into her very being by experiences no one had witnessed. The physical wounds had been treated, but the emotional ones were far less visible and far harder to heal. He crouched low, keeping his presence small and non-threatening. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you," he whispered. Bella's ears twitched, but she didn't step closer. Instead, she backed away cautiously, her eyes scanning the surroundings as if searching for unseen threats. Jake understood that forcing closeness would only deepen her fear. Instead, he decided to take a different approach, slowly introducing Bella to the herd in controlled, gentle ways that would allow her to rebuild trust not just in him, but in other horses as well. Over the next several days, Jake began leading Bella to the edge of the herd's grazing area, keeping a careful distance as she observed the other horses. The herd was calm and welcoming, their movements relaxed and open. Bella watched intently, but remained hesitant to join. Jake called over Dutch and Layla, two of his most experienced ranch hands, to assist with the gradual introduction. Together, they designed a plan to help Bella acclimate without overwhelming her. "Start with short visits," Dutch advised, his voice steady. "Let her watch the herd from a safe distance, then slowly bring her closer as she gets comfortable." Layla nodded. "We can use positive reinforcement, treats, gentle touches, to encourage her when she shows calm behavior." Jake agreed, knowing that patience would be key. Each day, he led Bella a little closer to the herd, allowing her to observe and listen. Bella's ears flicked toward the soft nickers and gentle stomps of the other horses, sounds that were foreign, yet strangely comforting. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Jake sat quietly with Bella near the edge of the herd. The filly's trembling had lessened, though her eyes still held the flicker of uncertainty. Slowly, a few horses approached, curious but respectful of the newcomer's space. Bella tensed, ready to retreat, but Jake's calm voice soothed her. "It's okay. They're not going to hurt you." The stallion nearest to her lowered his head in a peaceful greeting, and Bella hesitated, then took a tentative step forward. Jake felt a surge of hope. This was progress. Fragile, yes, but real. Bella was starting to understand that the world could be safe again, that connection was possible. That evening, back in the barn, Jake reflected on the delicate balance of healing. Physical care was essential, but the emotional wounds required a different kind of patience and understanding. He knew that Bella's journey was just beginning. He resolved to continue supporting her gently, never rushing, always listening to the subtle signals she gave. Trust could not be forced. It had to be nurtured, like a seed slowly breaking through hardened earth. As night fell over the ranch, Jake sat beside Bella's stall, the filly resting her head quietly, her body finally still. The road ahead was long, but in that moment there was peace, a quiet promise of healing and hope. Jake Thompson was working near the paddock gate when he felt a sudden, light nudge at his side. He paused, turning slowly, and caught sight of Bella's soft, inquisitive eyes fixed on him. She was standing closer than usual, her posture less tense, the faint quiver that had marked her movements all but gone. For a moment, she hesitated, then lifted her muzzle and gently nuzzled his outstretched hand. The motion was small but profound, a breakthrough in the slow, fragile progress they had made together. Jake's breath caught as he reached out, letting his palm rest against her soft nose. Bella's lips parted slightly, and the warmth of her breath brushed against his skin. It was a moment Jake had hoped for, but never dared to expect so soon. The filly who had once trembled at every sound was now seeking connection, offering trust in the simplest, most vulnerable way. Jake's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and hope. He spoke softly, his voice steady and kind. "Hey there, girl. You're doing good." Bella responded with a soft nicker, pressing her head gently against his palm. Over the past weeks, Jake had witnessed a gradual transformation. Bella's fear had begun to yield to curiosity, her wide eyes now sparkling with moments of calm rather than constant vigilance. The small steps, wandering near the herd, cautiously accepting treats, and today's gentle nuzzle, were milestones in her journey back from trauma. Jake lowered himself to the ground beside her, careful not to overwhelm her with sudden movements. He reached out slowly, running his fingers along her neck and shoulder, feeling the subtle relaxation in her muscles. Bella leaned into the touch, a quiet sigh escaping her lips. Around them, the ranch hummed with the soft sounds of evening, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of leaves, and the gentle stamping of hooves on earth. Bella's world was no longer defined by fear, but by the promise of belonging. Jake glanced toward the nearby herd, where Daisy and the other horses grazed peacefully. He knew that fully integrating Bella into the group would take time, but moments like this proved that her heart was opening. With patience and care, Bella was becoming part of something larger, a community that could offer safety, companionship, and trust. Jake stayed with her long into the evening, speaking quietly about the ranch, the horses, and the open skies above. He hoped that his calm presence would continue to reassure her, that the bond they shared would grow stronger with each passing day. As darkness settled, Jake led Bella back to the barn, where fresh straw awaited. She followed willingly, her steps steady and sure. Inside the quiet space, she lowered her head to rest, eyes half closed in a rare moment of peace. Jake stood beside her, watching over the filly who had come so far. He reflected on the journey they had traveled, from the frightened, trembling creature he had first found to this gentle soul offering a nuzzle of trust. The road ahead remained uncertain, but for now, Jake allowed himself to savor this breakthrough. The quiet triumph of patience, kindness, and the unspoken bond between human and horse. The morning sun spilled over the Wyoming horizon, casting a golden glow across the sprawling fields of Jake Thompson's ranch. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fresh hay and earth, a scent that had become familiar and comforting to Bella, the once frightened filly who now moved with a quiet confidence. Jake stood at the paddock gate, watching as Bella eagerly approached, a trough filled with water and a generous portion of feed. For the first time since Jake had found her near the water trough weeks earlier, Bella ate a full meal without hesitation. Her ribs, once sharply visible beneath a dull coat, were slowly filling out with the nourishment she so desperately needed. Her eyes, once wide with fear, now held a spark of life and curiosity that Jake had only dared to imagine. Jake smiled softly, a warmth spreading through his chest. The journey from that trembling, silent filly to the vibrant creature before him had been long and filled with challenges. But today was a milestone, a new beginning. As Bella finished her meal, she lifted her head and glanced toward the rest of the herd grazing nearby. The other horses moved with ease, their bodies relaxed, and their bonds evident in gentle nuzzles and soft nickers. Bella, too, seemed ready to take her place among them. Jake stepped into the paddock, his presence calm and reassuring. He called softly, "Come on, girl. Let's see how you do with the others today." Bella hesitated for a moment, but then moved forward, her steps steady and sure. The herd noticed her approach, and a few horses lifted their heads in curiosity. Daisy, Jake's trusted mare, ambled over first, her eyes gentle and welcoming. Bella lowered her head in response, a silent greeting that spoke of cautious acceptance. Jake watched intently as Bella mingled with the herd, her body language relaxed and open. She nickered softly, a sound that blended seamlessly with the chorus of the group. The other horses accepted her presence, and she began to move among them, joining in the rhythms of grazing and companionship. The transformation was remarkable. Bella was no longer the frightened filly who shied away from every sound or movement. She was becoming part of the ranch's living tapestry, her spirit brightening with each passing day. Jake felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. The patience, the quiet moments spent sitting beside her, the gentle encouragement. They had all led to this moment. He knew the journey wasn't over, but the hardest part, the rebuilding of trust and strength, had been achieved. As the day wore on, Jake shared Bella's story with the ranch hands, Dutch, Carson, and Layla, who listened with admiration and empathy. They marveled at her progress and discussed ways to continue supporting her growth, from enriching her environment to fostering positive interactions within the herd. Jake realized that Bella's journey was more than just a rescue. It was a lesson in compassion, resilience, and the power of unwavering patience. Her story had already begun to inspire those around him, reminding them to look beyond the surface and to recognize the quiet struggles that often go unnoticed. As evening descended, Jake stood by Bella's stall, watching her settle into the soft straw with a contented sigh. The filly's eyes closed slowly, her body finally at rest after a day filled with new experiences and growing confidence. Jake whispered softly, "You did good today, Bella. I'm proud of you." He reached out to stroke her mane, feeling the smooth warmth beneath his fingers. In that moment, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the barn and the fading light of dusk, Jake reflected on the profound bond they had forged. Bella's journey had taught him the importance of patience, understanding, and the courage it takes to heal both body and soul. He knew that life on the ranch would continue to present challenges, but with Bella thriving among the herd, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and hope. Together, they had turned a fragile beginning into a new chapter, one filled with promise, resilience, and the quiet strength born from trust. News of Bella's remarkable transformation began to ripple through the tight-knit community of ranchers and horse lovers in the region. Jake Thompson found himself sharing her story over campfires and at local gatherings, his voice steady as he recounted the frightened filly's journey from silent terror to vibrant member of the herd. Bella had become more than just a rescued horse. She was a symbol of hope and resilience, an example of what patience, kindness, and unwavering care could accomplish. Jake noticed a subtle shift among his peers. Ranchers who once viewed horses primarily as livestock began to pay closer attention to the subtle signs of distress and trauma in their animals. Conversations shifted from practical matters of breeding and feeding to include concerns about emotional well-being and the importance of attentive care. Bella's story had opened a door to greater empathy in a world often hardened by necessity. Realizing the impact her journey could have, Jake took it upon himself to train his ranch hands, Dutch, Carson, and Layla, in recognizing the quiet, often overlooked signs of distress in horses. He emphasized the importance of observation, patience, and gentle handling, sharing what he had learned through Bella's recovery. "Sometimes," Jake told them one afternoon as they gathered around the barn, "it's the smallest clues, a flinch, a hesitation, a dull look in the eye, that tell you the most. If we miss those signs, we're failing the animals we care for." The team listened intently, understanding that Bella's story wasn't just about one filly, but about a broader need for compassion and vigilance. They practiced techniques to help horses feel safe, to build trust slowly, and to create environments where healing could take root. Jake also began reaching out to neighboring ranchers, organizing informal workshops, and sharing Bella's story to inspire change beyond his own property. His efforts sparked a small but meaningful movement toward better animal welfare, encouraging a culture of care that valued both physical health and emotional resilience. As the years passed, Bella thrived under Jake's watchful eye. and the attentive hands of his team. She grew strong and spirited, a living testament to the power of healing through kindness. Her presence became a quiet inspiration, reminding everyone who met her that even the deepest wounds could mend with time and love. Jake often reflected on the journey that had started with a frightened filly refusing to eat or drink. He remembered the moment he first noticed her trembling near the water trough, the discovery of the painful wire, and the slow, patient work that followed. Each step had been a challenge, but also a lesson in humility and hope. Through Bella, Jake came to understand that healing was not just about mending the body, but about nurturing the soul. He learned to listen to the animals, to his team, and to the subtle messages that life offered. In quiet moments on the ranch, Jake would find Bella standing near the fence, her coat shining in the sun, eyes bright and alert. She would nuzzle his hand, a gesture full of trust and gratitude that spoke volumes without words. Their bond was a reminder of the profound connection between humans and animals, a connection built on patience, understanding, and the courage to ask for help when it was needed. Bella's story, once a fragile whisper of hope, had grown into a powerful legacy. It inspired others to look deeper, to care more, and to believe in the possibility of transformation. And for Jake Thompson, it was a daily reminder that sometimes the smallest clues revealed the deepest needs, and that listening with an open heart could lead to miracles beyond imagination.